Well, we are back to our theme, New Public Administration. When I concluded the last session, I hinted what we are going to take up for discussion today. That is, New Public Administration was a remarkable development in the evolution of public administration, both theory and practice. Now, exactly after 20 years gap, the Syracuse University's Minnowbrook Conference Hall again witnessed in 2008 another gathering on new public administration. Now, this third conference was, in a sense, a continuity with the last two, and also a significant different from the last two. The first Minnowbrook Conference of 1968, its main theme was relevance and social equity and values. The second conference of 1988, the background perspective was Simonian perspective, that is value neutrality and measurement, and also taking note of the emerging scenario of new public management, a ideology which was born of the political philosophy of new neoliberalism and a new kind of relationship between government and governance. Now, this third Minnowbrook Conference was held at the same time, that is September, and in the same year of 20 years gap, that is 2008. This third Minnowbrook Conference context was globalization in its full swing, because whatever doubt and debates were there in the second conference in 1988 was not there at all. In 2008, the American society, for that matter, was thoroughly globalized world, and globalization was not a theme of debate anymore. Everybody accepted the network globalized living. Economic slowdown has started, and for the first time American economy was not sure which way it was developing. Third context was governance as an ideology, as distinct from government as a structure of administration, was also more or less universally accepted. And fourth one, that is very significant for American society, was that for the first time an Afro-American was elected to the office of presidency of United States. All these factors brought about a new milieu, both ideological and technological. The conference itself, the third conference itself in 2008, was something different from the composition of the conference participants in Minnowbrook 1 and Minnowbrook 2. For the first time, we find the young scholars of public administration and from other disciplines were given a completely free hand and free scope to voice their attitudes, grievances, and suggestions. It was both a stock-taking session and also a session which is engaged in drawing the roadmap for future development of public administration in the United States and for that matter in the globalized world. The first conference was under the general influence, or rather ideologically dominated, by Dwight Waldo. The second one was a tussle between followers of Herbert Simon and followers of Waldo. But this third conference, the great grandfather of relevance doctrine and new public administration, Dwight Waldo, was no more. Here we find a main figure as George Frederickson of Kansas University. The third conference was another characteristics, that was it had a global concern. Taking the global context as a whole, the discussion was conducted especially by the younger scholars at the first stage. There was a second stage where senior academics joined, and the participation was for the first time included non-American scholars. This is a very significant development in the evolution of new public administration movement. Now, younger scholars, they were setting the tone of the conference. In a sense, these younger sections included public administration scholars, economists, and even the specialists in technology and engineering sciences. The younger scholars emphasized all along the importance of networked governance. Now this networking technique was no more a point of debate and discussion. They said that in 2008, American society, and for that matter, a large part of the globe, was under the influence of computers and other networking systems. And main goal was reconceptualizing of public administration in this changed situation. So they were trying to return to search for an independent discipline or identity for public administration. Now certain terms and phrases were quite frequently used which characterize this conference. For example, networked governance and collaborative public management. That is, management, the word management became very popular since the second Minnebrook conference in 1980s, 1990s, and now it was accepted by all participants. Because administration, the old-fashioned Wilsonian sense, or subsequent the theorist of public administration, implied some sort of a government control or some sort of a control as such. But management means a collaborative effort to get things done. So not the rule-bound classical model, but the technology-governed, networked universe. That was the background of Minnebrook 3. For the first time, the younger scholars, and for that matter, the senior leaders in the field, they all agreed that there cannot be, in the changed situation, any grand theory of public administration. Public administration is no longer a discipline which can boast of a fundamental grand theory applicable in regard to all problems and in all times, in all contexts. Public administration now was basically defined as multi-theoretical. There could be, it was debated forcefully by a large number of participants that there could be a number of theories which can be accommodated within public administration, and the conference participants coming from diverse disciplines, economists, technical specialists, and engineers and other branch of sciences, they all agreed that public administration relevant for the time, for the age, for the era, prevalent in America or even elsewhere in the globe, was multi-theoretical. Public administration, at the same time, it was argued, must have a human face. That is, though technology overtook the general atmosphere of deliberations in Minute 3 in 2008, but no participants disagreed over the point, but after all, public administration, both as a theoretical discipline and as a profession, as a technique of delivering services to the people, must work for the benefit of the people. It must not adopt any work, any program, and adopt any attitude which will go against interest of the public. That is to say, public administration, new public administration, NPA as they used to call it, must have a human face. Public administration must break with the past. Past means the tradition of Wilson or tradition of Max Weber, the tradition of rule-bound system of administering things, rules and decisions. It must be, in the changed circumstances of 2008, must be a collaborative interaction and meaningful engagement with the stakeholders. Now, this point is very significant because now public administration was understood as a field where stakeholders are not only the bureaucrats or officers in the government. Stakeholders include, for the first time, the private sector, the civil society or independent NGOs, and overall the market. Market is a great equalizer. Market sets the standard. Market indicates the demand and supplies. So this triad of civil society, market and private sector, they must be regarded as stakeholders and important stakeholders for that matter, and public administration must take serious note of this. So there must be a meaningful engagement of public administration with this whole group of stakeholders. Next point that received many importance voices, that is, public administration must try to fill the gap between public problems and the governmental capability, because in many countries, I can tell you from my own experience, and you also know your own experience, that some of the developing countries, the populist politicians contesting for being elected to parliament or state legislatures often give to the electorate some promises which they themselves know in their heart that it cannot be fulfilled. But still they go on. Now this is just an aberration of parliamentary democracy. Unsubstantial problems and proposals, dream proposals, they are not meaningful democratically. So this gathering of scholars and specialists in Mini-book 3 in 2008 in Syracuse University, Minobrook Hall, they were insistent on making public administration of the new age as a practical science. Public administration must not indulge in unpracticable proposals and visions. The goal-driven participatory governance, this was set as the background against which discussions revolved. I repeat again and draw your attention to the phrase participatory and governance. That is, the term government or bureaucracy was shunned altogether, and governance, where the triad of market, private sector and civil society dominated along with bureaucracy. That process, that world was to set the tone of new public administration. In short, public administration, the conference insisted, must be redesigned by making commitment to responsiveness, first, second, social equality, and third, participation. These three concepts were earmarked as indicating the direction to which new public administration should evolve. Public administration is not a mere government-driven activities. The third conference was a counter to the conventional ethnocentric public administration, because till the end of the 20th century, it was believed that public administration, basically originating from America and dominating force in the social science and a dominating perspective in the total policymaking system of the government, that has to be countered. Countered, that is, it is no longer, for the first time it was recognized that it is no longer ethnocentric, that is to say, the world perspective, developed and developing world, all these areas must be, and their problems must be taken into account to give a consistent definition, or I should say redefinition of new public administration. This new orientation of public administration should be explained a bit further. First of all, I will draw your attention to a phrase much used during this conference for the first time, and that is collaborative governance. That this collaborative governance, this expression, basically underlines that there must not be any bureaucratic lethargy in serving the people. The second new concept which emerged in this conference of 2008 was because of the participants of specialist scientists and engineers. That is interoperability. Now this is a term borrowed from engineering sciences. That is, the concept of one science can be used profitably in another science. And in this way, this engineering vocabulary of interoperability was used in this conference for the first time. That is to say, they mean this thereby that now public administration as a discipline, public administration as a profession must take full advantage of the revolutionary changes brought about by IT, or to be more specific, ICT, information communication technology. Now here, in doing that, they were not unforgetful about the political implications also. It must not be a field dominated by specialists and engineers or scientists, because this conference recognized side by side that there is an area which can be called democracy and citizen participation. If this area is forgotten or neglected, then public administration will lose its meaning and charm. Second topic that they gave importance was transparency and trust. That is, to take an integrated view of government resources and operations. Here is a point again, I draw your attention to the miserable conditions in some of the developing countries, that the politicians in power or bureaucrats in power, they do not take into account the integrated view of resources available in the hands of the government or resources available in the operational activities. That is why no government is trusted in developing world nowadays. This is a gap of confidence that this third Minobrook drew attention of the world. Then government and economic development. This was another field which creates a lot of confusion in the developing world and also some of the so-called developed world. If we look at to the miseries of some European countries now, like Greeks, Italy, Spain, Turkey, France to some extent, Belgium, that is, no country for that matter is free from this gap between government management and economic development. Next important thing that was insisted upon by this conference was long-term government strategy. There is a buzzword in political science that politicians care for next elections, statesmen care for the next generation. This is a valid point to be taken note of. The participants in this third Minobrook conference, they emphasize this by saying that governance strategies for development must be of a long-term nature, so that with change in office of one political party from another political party, there is no disjunction and the national interest does not suffer. This is a very valid point for the developing countries to note. Then next very important thing, for the first time we find in this conference that attention was drawn to stimulating local, regional and national economies. That is to say, there is a clear hint that development must not be restricted to the Western world only. Development of other areas of the world, especially they pointed out Asia and Africa, must be taken into account while formulating long-term policy measures applicable to the global governance. Strengthening publicness of public administration was the next important aspect to which everybody's attention was drawn, that in which sense public administration is public. That is, public administration derives its legitimacy because of the fact that public administration should profess to fulfill the needs of the public, needs of the total conception of the public in the sense inclusive of marginalized, neglected sections of the society. And that is why public administration was to be reconceptualized, and they reconfirmed that public administration must have public roots of governance. And in this connection, another problem was raised in the debate. What about deliberative democracy, a system of reason dimensions and collective judgment? Fierce, chaotic parliamentary debate is absolutely meaningless for sustained development programs. Now, while giving his concluding remarks, David Rosenblum made certain observations which are quite valid, because the grand old man is no more. He died in 2000. So now it was Rosenblum who gave the concluding address, and there he made certain valid points. First of all, new public administration must be free from orthodoxy of boundary consciousness. Secondly, public administration has to be multidisciplinary and adopt methodological pluralism. And thirdly, there is no clinging to single set of values, parliamentarism or contractualism or liberalism, nothing. There must not be anything single clinging. And lastly, there must be a comparative perspective necessary in order to be creative. Now, what do we find from this review of Third Minobrook Conference and redefining new public administration? First of all, number one, that new administration, public administration, must have a stronger link between records and productivity. Secondly, new public administration must be interdisciplinary, global, and inclusive. So these are the net result of deliberations at Minobrook Conference 3 in 2008, and I think by this time we have got a general working idea of what new public administration as an intellectual movement wants to convey.